Hello, I am back. Hello, I am back to share, continuing on with my series talking about working with difficult emotions, specifically around fear and anxiety, and really just overwhelm and getting stuck in these difficult emotions. And this is the third part of this series, so go back and watch the first two videos if you hadn't had a chance to watch them. But really, just to recap, fear is a totally normal experience. It's part of the human experience. We are designed to be able to detect danger and feel fear. But it's so important for our health and especially our mental and emotional well-being to be able to move back and forth from that state of fight or flight into rest and digest. And last week we really talked about how we can really rely on our social structures as a resource, as a tool for supporting us in working with these difficult emotions. But what I would really like to dive into today is talking about how we can create boundaries within ourselves, within our own thought patterns, to work with these emotions. And so what that might look like, and the most important thing here is I really want to spark inspiration, but I would like to encourage you to then use your own creativity and determine if these resources are helpful for you or something that you'd like to experiment with, or if it creates other ideas in your mind that could work for you. I always encourage people to use an experiential process. Experiment with different tools for making your life better. And you can always change things, make modifications. But some of the ways that I see boundaries working within ourselves is, for one, understanding that we need to take care of ourselves first before, if we can take care of ourselves first before exposing ourselves to information that will cause fear and anxiety. And so what this looks like typically for me is making sure that I follow like my own morning ritual, creating space in the morning time before I ever go in and start checking my emails or diving into social media, looking at the news. Before I ever look at any device, I take time for myself in the mornings, even if that means, that first cup of coffee. I personally love to have lemon water in the morning, taking a few just deep breaths and spending some time kind of recentering and coming into my body before exposing myself to any information that may cause overwhelm. So really taking care of yourself first. The other thing to keep in mind is, before exposing yourself to information that could be stressful, taking note if you are hungry, right? If your blood sugar levels are unstable, if you're thirsty, if you're tired, if you didn't get really good sleep the night before, then maybe it's not a good day for looking at the media, or spending too much time. It's somewhat unavoidable in our culture for a lot of people, and especially if you're working and you need to be on emails and doing different things. But maybe if you feel like you didn't get a good night of sleep, trying to protect yourself, just creating awareness around that and trying to protect yourself from information overload just a little. And also creating a specified amount of time for looking at stressful information. So obviously there's always going to be more and more stories. There's always more to learn about, always more to understand. But how much can your brain particularly process in any given amount of time before it starts to become overwhelming and get kind of all mixed up anyways? So a lot of times what's helpful for this, especially if you're just getting started with creating this type of boundary, is setting a timer, because time can easily go by very quickly when we are fueling that part of us that craves more information. So set a timer, set a boundary around the amount of time that you are given for looking at information. Also setting boundaries around the sources that you view. Yes, it's great to have to be getting your information from a varied spectrum of sources. But if there are sources of news or media that don't sit right with you, that always cause you that extra fear and overwhelm, then maybe don't look at them. Don't expose yourself to what they have to say, the twist that they're going to put on it. And that may be all that I have to say around boundaries with information. But there is another boundary that I would like to talk about within ourselves, and that is the amount of time that we give our energy for thinking about things that are causing us stress. And I'm totally guilty of this. I think nobody's perfect. We can all let our thoughts take over. But keep in mind that you do have control over your thought patterns, and you can choose, again, you can choose to have a different thought. And so what this might look like, if there is something particularly causing you anxiety right now, or if you do find that you're a particularly empathetic person and you take on all of the stresses of the world, then create an amount of time every day, a time and a space that you can sit down, maybe with a journal, maybe voice memos in your phone, recording yourself talking. Maybe it's talking to a certain friend or a coach. But create a container for yourself in which you can get rid of all of that stress, all of the things that you're worried about. And block that off as an amount of time, ideally not right before bed. Maybe it's right when you get home from work, or right when you stop working for the day, or just finding that special time in your day that you can dedicate to this. And that way, whenever the thoughts come up in your mind, as they will, they're still going to come up in your mind throughout the day. And when they do, you can gently say to yourself, now's not the time to focus on that. I'm going to earmark it, I'm going to make a note of it, and I'm going to focus on that particular stressor later on during my block of time that I have for stress, for worrying, for overanalyzing. And this kind of goes hand in hand with what I mentioned earlier about digesting media. If you are blocking out time for digesting media, I would also encourage you to block out a similar amount of time for interpreting that information. How does that news article that you're reading or story that you're consuming, how does that affect your life? Right? We don't have to sit with it. We don't have to carry it around with us. Consume the information and then dedicate time for seeing where it fits within your story of the world. How does it affect your life? And then choose to let it go. Choose to focus on the things that are really important to you in your life today, what's going on in your world. So to recap, really just talking about creating boundaries within our own thought patterns of how we are consuming and dealing with things that are stressful, things that create fear and anxiety. And the tools that we're talking about are creating a boundary around how you're consuming this information, when you're consuming it, what's going on in your body while you're consuming information, and also creating a specific time and space for creating a container around your worries, and then leaving them there, moving on throughout your day without carrying that fear and anxiety along with you. Hopefully this is helpful, and I'm so loving this series. I love that I did this around October for spooky season. Of course, Halloween is such a fun time. It's so fun to do all of to just divulge ourselves in all of the scary and spooky things. But what I'm talking about here really does have to do with things that are real in our world, things that are valid to be afraid of, but we just don't need to carry them around with us all day long. So hopefully that's helpful for you, and I'm looking forward to sharing more next week.